Foreign Secretary David Lammy speaking yesterday in Parliament. Of course, one of his ministers, Hamish Falconer, who is a Foreign Office Minister, summoned the Israeli ambassador, Tzipi Hosaveli, to the Foreign Office yesterday to give her a dressing down and to say that the trade talks that were happening between the United Kingdom and Israel were being suspended. Now, I am probably one of the biggest supporters of Israel that you can come across. I absolutely support the right of Israel to exist. I love its people. I've been there. It's a wonderful country. I think its people have been through a horrendous amount, not just historically, but of course in the last couple of years after the 7th of October massacre. Horrendous things happened then by Hamas. I would honestly ask, and I often ask people who are critics of Israel, what would you do about Hamas? How would you eradicate Hamas? How would you stop the threat from Hamas? And that is a very, very big problem. But it is becoming increasingly difficult for people like me to defend the actions of Israel. There's a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. There's no doubt about that. Not enough aid is getting in. And I want to talk to the former Israeli government spokesman, Eylon Levy, about that. Eylon, I want to get your reaction, certainly. First of all, thank you for joining me. I want to get your reaction certainly to what David Lammy was saying. But first of all, I want you to help me. What would you say to people like me who, and many of our viewers and listeners actually, who are supportive of the Israeli people, no doubt about that, but they see what is happening in Gaza at the moment and they can't support the Israeli government's plan of action or inaction in terms of what is happening?
Peter, there is no doubt that the situation in Gaza is miserable because war is hell. And as I've been saying since the beginning, this is a war that Israel didn't start, it didn't want, it didn't expect. But by Jove, it's a war that Israel has to win. And it has to win because otherwise there will be a next time, because we're fighting against a jihadi death cult whose stated reason for existing is to continue waging jihad against Israel until we're all dead. So Israelis understand if this isn't the last Gaza war, there will be a next Gaza war. Now, I know people in Britain celebrated just a few weeks ago VE Day, a great celebration of total victory over Nazi Germany in Europe, which it inflicted a terrible price on German civilians. I mean, the British Army was not kind and gentle, and this didn't happen with kid gloves. But there is now peace on the continent, and Germany is a prosperous democratic country because that evil regime, the Nazis, were totally destroyed. And Britain is proud of what it did then. War is hell. No one says that war is pretty, but Britain is proud that it managed to defeat that evil regime and turn the leaf for a new future. And Israel is hoping that when the Hamas regime falls and the military threat of a jihadi terrorist group from the Gaza Strip falls as well, then we'll be able to turn a new leaf and hopefully begin to see a path to peace in our region.
But you know and I know, Eylon, that it's not 80 years ago. There are many ways, and this is not a symmetric war, this is an asymmetric war between a state and between a jihadi murderous organisation that doesn't exist in the same way as a state exists, the state of Germany previously. The parallel, I get it, and I understand why you're saying it, and war is very unpretty, but the surgical nature of these things can be done better than having women, children, innocent men as well, some of whom are actually standing up against Hamas, suffering, not having enough food. Israel could, right this moment, put the aid in that needs to go in to Gaza. Why is it not doing that? Why is this blockade, to some extent, continuing?
Yeah, and it's so important you mentioned the Gazans who are bravely standing up against Hamas because they
not
have
enough
been
coverage
totally
in the not enough coverage in the media of those.
No,
We're giving them coverage.
Ignored and let down by the mainstream media. They understand what protesters in London don't understand, which is that Hamas brought this misfortune on them. This war could end immediately if Hamas surrenders and frees the hostages. You're right as well when you note that this is an asymmetric war. Hamas is, I mean, it's the government of Gaza, it's the regime there. Hamas is to Gaza what the Taliban is to Afghanistan. And it's not fighting with tanks on the battlefield, it's fighting by hiding under schools and under homes and under hospitals in a network of tunnels longer than the London Underground. And that explains the destruction you see in Gaza because the enemy has literally been fighting from underneath civilian buildings. And now another one of the challenges you mentioned is aid. Now, it is important that aid reach the people who need it while making sure the terrorists can't steal it. Unfortunately, the existing UN mechanism is broken. It has been exploited by Hamas in order to finance its war machine. Hamas has been able to hijack trucks, tax the goods, sell them on the black market, and use the money, the food donated by British taxpayers, to pay the fighters who are starving the hostages. This has been quite literally prolonging the war. So what Israel is saying now is it backs a US initiative to get aid directly to the people who need it. private US contractors will set up distribution centers where civilians can come and get rations and get the food they need without any risk of Hamas intercepting the food along the way. Because in order to get to a day when Hamas falls and this war ends, it needs to be starved of its cash. And in order to starve it of its cash, it needs to be cut off from the corrupt UN system that it has exploited in order to steal food donated by the British taxpayer.
I also completely agree with you in the very, very lazy assumption that the United Nations is the solution to all problems. UNRWA was a disgraceful and is a disgraceful organisation that had its members were actually members of a number of its members, about a dozen of them at least, were members of Hamas who took part in the 7th of October. To go back to Israel and to go back to the Israeli government, do you honestly believe what they're doing at the moment is bringing a state of affairs where Hamas is defeated, if it indeed can be defeated, and the hostages are coming back? Do you think we're closer to that because of the Israeli government strategy? The UK government certainly doesn't think that.
Well, it's funny that the UK government doesn't think that, because Israel's military strategy is based on the UK's own strategy against ISIS in Mosul. I mean, let's go down memory lane. Over 10 years ago, Islamic State captured huge swathes of territory in Syria and Iraq, and the UK was part of an international coalition that rained hellfire on ISIS. What they did was they moved civilians out of harm's way, they encouraged civilians to get out of Mosul, and then when the terrorists weren't able to use civilians as human shields, the UK lent air support, the Iraqi forces went in, and if you look at images of Mosul, I mean, they look like Gaza now or Dresden 80 years ago. Israel's strategy has not been working because it's been going into Gaza, fighting Hamas, withdrawing, and then Hamas keeps going back into the areas that Israel fought in. Soldiers are going into the same places 4 or 5 times. It's a game of cat and mouse. So Israel's strategy now is based on saying, we're pushing into the Gaza Strip, we're going to claim territory from Hamas, and we're going to keep it until Hamas falls. And as for the hostages, at least 23 hostages still alive, starving, being tortured, literally tortured in underground dungeons in Gaza. Israel hopes that military pressure is going to force Hamas to agree to release hostages in exchange for a pause in the fighting. It's a very risky gamble, but the alternative is to pay the ransom that Hamas is demanding. And this Israeli government, and there is a fierce debate in Israel, and I'm happy to get into this. This Israeli government has decided we can't afford to pay the ransom that Hamas is demanding.
Smotrich is someone who has not been helpful here. We heard him, the finance minister, we heard him being quoted by David Lammy there on relations between a key ally of Israel in the United Kingdom. Those relations are really, really bad at the moment. Your ambassador, CP Hodavelli, was called to the Foreign Office yesterday. You can see why the UK is doing this, can't you?
Well, the UK has decided that it's happy for this war to end with Hamas still in power.
I'm not sure that's a fair characterisation.
Well, you know, happy may be pushing it, but the UK is content for this war to end with Hamas in power. Mr. Lammy can say all he likes that he insists that Hamas can have no role in the governance of Gaza, but it doesn't matter how much he bangs on the dispatch box. Hamas isn't going to remove itself from power. The only thing that is going to remove Hamas from power is a military operation, just like ISIS wasn't going to resign peacefully and had to be pushed out by the might of the British Army and an international coalition. Britain has decided, whether because of political pressure at home, the massive protests we've seen in London, or whatever other reasons, that it can live with an end of the war in which Hamas remains in power.
It's had that pressure for 18 months plus. It's had that pressure for a very long time for many people in the Labour Party. You'll know as well as I do that its stated position is that it wants a two-state solution. It has people on the left within it who will be pushing for the Palestinian cause to be supported more than the Israeli cause. But we've got to this stage now, and my view of this, and feel free to disagree, but when you have America on the brink, when you have the UK calling in the ambassador and saying trade talks, whether they were worthwhile or not, I don't know, but that they've been suspended. This is a stage further, isn't it? Israel is becoming more isolated.
And that is why Hamas is praising the UK. Hamas has praised the UK, France and Canada for the latest pressure against Israel. I don't know who the last British Foreign Secretary was who was praised by a jihadi regime, but it's a terrible indictment, I think, of British diplomacy. Now, the reason that Hamas is praising David Lammy is that it thinks Lammy has thrown it a lifeline. Hamas wants to end this war in power. Hamas wants to end this war, still governing Gaza, still oppressing its people, diverting aid in order to build more tunnels, to rebuild its missile arsenal, in order to resume war against Israel at a time that it sees fit. And Israelis want to defeat Hamas because we don't want more war. Peter, we've got guys my age who've been in reserves for over 500 days now. They have jobs, academic degrees, wives. They've been in reserves for 500 days. They want to go home. But they understand that if they go home before Hamas is removed from power, then the next war is only a matter of time. And it's Israelis who are going to be fighting it, not people in Britain. So I think the British government has decided, for its own reasons, and that's legitimate, that it can live with this war ending, with Hamas still in power in Gaza. But when Gaza is just down the road from anywhere in Israel, when you can see it from the kibbutzim where people were slaughtered on October 7th, Israel says the only way this war can end is with Hamas removed from power. And you know, right at the beginning of the war, the UK understood it. You know, Canada is one of the countries now joining the pressure against Israel. I remember when Canada said that it wants a sustainable ceasefire, and said a ceasefire can only be sustainable if Hamas is removed from power. Britain understands that a ceasefire cannot be sustainable if Hamas remains in power to plot the next October 7th massacre, more missiles against Israel, more hostage-taking crises. That's why the demand we need to hear from Britain, and especially from people who want this war to end like I do, Hamas has to surrender, lay down your weapons, go into exile, release the hostages, and the war that Hamas started on October 7th can end tomorrow.
Eylon, thank you for that. I really learn an awful lot from your Twitter as well.